All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started actually. So welcome to our panel. As you can see, the title of this panel is Navigating Promotion and Tenure in the Time of COVID-19. And my name is Sarah Huff, and my co-host, I think Frankie is not here quite yet, but we'll let him introduce himself when he arrives. But our goal of this session was to kind of build space to talk about promotion and tenure in COVID. I know we all have a lot of questions about this. So we have this really wonderful group of panelists who've agreed to join us today. And we're really excited about this group of panelists because, as you'll learn very shortly, they represent institutional diversity within SPSP and geographic diversity and disciplinary diversity within SPSP. So we're able to get lots of different perspectives from people who have been in departmental and university-wide or institution-wide administration at their institutions. So while we wait for people to join, I'm actually just going to start with this. So the question is, what do you hope to get out of this session? So if you can text this code and your message, this is the number that you'll text it to. I tested this with my students yesterday and it worked. So hopefully some responses will come in. Maybe people don't have their phones. All right, well, we can come back to that and see if there are any answers. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to hear from the panelists. So if you all don't mind introducing yourselves, and I'd love for you to share where you are right now, what your role is right now at your institution. And then I've asked them to share one thing that your institution has done to support faculty during this time. And then also, if you had a magic wand, what would you do to support faculty? What else would you do? Kristen, since you're on here first, do you mind starting?
Sure, and thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to be a part of this panel. So I am Kristen Nicole Dukes. I am the Dean for Institutional Diversity at Allegheny College, which is located in Northwestern PA. I am so close to Ohio that this might as well be Ohio as well. So a lot of people, when I say Pennsylvania, think the Northeast, like not quite, it's a little more Midwest. In my role as Dean for Institutional Diversity at Allegheny, I am the Senior Diversity Officer of the college, which means I am in charge of shaping and implementing strategy around diversity, equity, and inclusion for the entire institution. So that's across employees and students. Prior to coming to Allegheny, I was an associate professor of psychology at Simmons University in Boston. So I have been through the tenure track and came out on the other side an administrator. Let's see, something about Allegheny. Allegheny is a small liberal arts college that is teaching intensive and focused, though there is a robust undergraduate research program. We have only undergraduate students between 18 and 1900 right now, I believe. And yeah, a faculty of about 150 full-time tenure track or tenured faculty. Do you want me to go ahead and answer your first question now, or are we going to do a full round of intros?
Up to you. What would you prefer?
So I'll just go ahead and answer the first question,
Great.
and then we can come back for the second question. My magic wand is a little longer. So the first question, the ways in which the college has supported faculty during COVID-19. So one of the big things about Allegheny, and I think I need to put this into context for folks, is we are small and we are in a relatively rural part of Northwestern PA. So we're located in Meadville, Pennsylvania. That's about 13,000 people. Because of that and because of COVID positivity rates, we have opened for in-person operations. So we had in-person teaching in the fall, and we'll have in-person teaching in the spring. We modified our calendar so that we have an intensive module 1. So there was a 3-week intensive course at the beginning of this calendar year. So that's what students are doing now, but students will be returning back to campus next week. So they're moving in the 17th and the 18th. So I think that that's important context to provide in terms of what we've done to support faculty. And then also we have our own internal health agency, the Allegheny College Health Agency, that provides guidance in a protocol of testing for faculty, staff, all employees, and students. So we have our own also internal protocol and PPE and a number of things to make the campus community as safe as possible. So I'm going to provide that context before going into how we've accommodated folks. And that is part of the accommodation that we have gone the lengths to do that. So all faculty have the opportunity to work remotely or teach remotely. Each one of our classes in the fall and in the spring are set up for hybrid instruction. So students can attend in person or remotely. Faculty have the opportunity to teach in person or remotely. Additionally, faculty have additional support from the Director of Faculty Development and Programming on COVID-specific teaching remotely. So one of the things we did in the spring when we first, I can't believe it's been a year, but when we first went remote back last March, is we initially put out a survey at the end of that semester to students and to faculty to get a better understanding of what worked when going remote, what didn't work. And we used that information to do some intensive training sessions and workshops for faculty over the summer to support them in making these courses hybrid and also making them completely remote for the module A or the J term. I've heard a lot of places call it a J term. So those are like the primary things that we've done up front. The things that are coming now is we're beginning conversations about tenure and promotion and what the implications are on that level. So I'll stop there and let someone else speak and come back later with my magic wand. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kristen. I think that's a great idea. Maybe we can even push the magic wand till later in the session. Yingyi, do you mind going next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Yingyi Hong, and I'm talking to you from Hong Kong now. I work at the Business School of Chinese University of Hong Kong. And then in the past 20-some 30 years, I have worked in different universities around the world. For example, including UIUC in the States, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, and Hong Kong University of Science and Technology before, and my current position at Chinese U. And also I have worked in different departments, including psychology department, division of social sciences, marketing department, and now I'm in management. And in all of these universities and departments, I have served on tenure and promotion committees. And also I have written assessment letters to evaluate tenure and promotion cases for university in many parts of the world. And so I'm very happy to share my experience with you today. So to answer the first question, so what is the best thing your institute has done to support faculty over the past year? So in Hong Kong at Chinese U, we have been using online Zoom teaching. So most of the courses are virtual courses. So at the very beginning, many faculties were not used to it. So I think one of the best thing is that the university provide a lot of resources in teaching and helping faculty to adopt online teaching. And also at the same time, because we have annual evaluation, and one of the criteria is teaching score. So, but in the past years, because of the Zoom teaching, so they are not counting teaching score so much. So I think that is one thing that the university is trying to help. And then also in terms of tenure and promotion evaluation, almost all of the universities in Hong Kong, including my university, have given a 1-year extension to faculty. And then, however, they use different ways. And so we have a opt-in or opt-out procedures. Opt-in meaning by default, there were no extension, but the faculty can apply. And my university used that, and I have seen many applications, and usually they are granted with 1-year extension. And there is also opt-out meaning by default. There are already 1-year extension for everybody, but you can apply for not getting the extension. And I think some people, you know, from my observation, they don't need a 1-year extension, and they would rather up for tenure as planned. So we can talk more about that later. So that's all for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Ying.
Thank you.
Fiona?
Hi, everyone. I'm Fiona Lee, and I am at the University of Michigan. I'm professor of psychology, and I'm also Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Professional Development for the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. Sorry for such a long title, but it's I didn't pick this long title. But so one thing I want to say is that my Associate Dean position, it's for the college, you know, so not for the entire university, but our college is very, very big. So we have about 1,000 faculty members in all 3 divisions of natural sciences, social sciences, and the humanities. So I think one of our biggest challenges is dealing with the sort of really the diversity of the type of research that is going on within the college. So we have people who travel to other countries for a long time to do field research. We have people working in labs with live animals and unstable chemicals, and people who work in archives of libraries, you know, with rare documents. And everybody is being affected by COVID in different ways and need accommodations for their research in really different ways. So I think one of the best things that we have done for the college is really one of the things that we created basically a response team. And the response team have people who are sort of, some of them are more focused on natural science research. Some people on the response teams are focused on students. Somebody is on, you know, space. And we have like a central email where people can, you know, sort of type in their questions, what's happening. And the response teams look at that every day, because when this first hit, they're just unpredictable things that are happening with research, with teaching, and everything that faculty and students and staff are involved in. So being able to respond to questions and give people answers right away was something that what I think people find very helpful, that one email, they don't have to think about who to ask, what, you know, do I call IT, do I call facilities? You go to one place and we figure out who to call and, you know, how to respond. It's a lot of work, you know, for such a large university to have to do this, but I think at the beginning it was something that was absolutely necessary. And I would say the other thing that was really important was the tenure clock extension, like Ying Yi mentioned, and making it easy for assistant professors to use the extension, you know, like no hassle, not a lot of forms, not a lot of hoops, but some, and to normalize it as much as possible. And giving faculty, especially assistant professors, more support in time. And, you know, if you had like small research grants that you can give out here and there to help out, more help with laboratory staff so that they can keep their specimens alive. Examples like that really makes a huge difference. So a lot of people think, well, what about changing standards? I mean, I think that's hard, but giving faculty more support and more time is something that, makes a big difference that we can do as a college.
Thanks, Fiona. And Danny?
Yeah, hi, I'm Danny McIntosh. I'm Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences at the University of Denver. The University of Denver is a medium-sized research institution in an urban setting. We have about 5,000 undergraduates and about the same number of graduate and professional students. I'm a professor in the Department of Psychology. The college is the Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, not the Natural Sciences. We have about 2,000 majors. We teach all the undergraduates across the university, about 250 faculty lines. The faculty lines are primarily tenure series and teaching series. At DU, our teaching series are on multi-year contracts with rank and promotion paralleling the tenure series. Just a sort of a sense of who we are. With COVID, in spring quarter, we went all online. What we've been doing this year is having a mix of modalities. So we have in-person classes, we have hybrid and HiFlex, which are here differentiated types of modalities, as well as a fully online. And our attempt has been for modality to follow pedagogy. So it is not full choice, it is what makes sense for the class, and then that's how the class is taught, and we've tried to kind of move faculty around within that. So what have we done? We have we've delayed reviews like others have, which is good. The other thing we did is we provided backup financial. One of the concerns about delaying tenure reviews, you lose a year of raise, and that compounding. So if people delay and they get tenure or they're promoted on the teaching series, you can go back and you get the raise retroactive to that time. So there's not the financial disincentive to take that time. The other thing that we've done is we've paid for class assistants to make teaching easier in HiFlex types of models. And we've had, as the others have, course designers and faculty development to learn how to use Zoom. We're also working on training tenure and promotion committees on both different types of decision-making and how to be thinking about the impact. One question that we're dealing with is the one of COVID statements. I hope we'll talk about that later on, because I think it is not an uncomplicated approach, and we're having debates and discussions about those now. We've also allowed people not to put forward their quantitative and qualitative student feedback in classes. We're pretty suspicious of those to begin with, so we're trying to use better, richer teaching data than student feedback. And I'll wait for the magic wand piece for later.
Thanks, Danny. I actually learned some things about our institution in that, so thank you. So I didn't fully introduce myself. I'm Sarah Huff, and I'm a teaching assistant professor at the University of Denver, and also a member of SPSP's Early Career Committee. And so this symposium is also kind of sponsored by the Early Career Committee. And now that Frankie's here, I'll let Frankie introduce himself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Frankie. I'm a third-year assistant professor at Purdue University. Nice to meet everyone.
Thanks, Frankie. And Frankie's also on the Early Career Committee with me. So just a quick agenda, and then I'll stop sharing my screen so we can see all of the panelists and some of you. I already talked about the goals. We did an introduction. These are some of the high-level topics. Already some of these were previewed in those introductions, but these are based on questions that people pre-submitted in a survey. So we'll try to answer as many of those as possible in the remaining time, and then maybe we'll have some time for additional questions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see you all. And I think you all set this up nicely. One of the first questions that we got was about promotion and tenure extensions, and your recommendations kind of for what we feel should do, the pros and cons of that. Fiona mentioned that changing the standards is really hard. The question that we got was actually about that. How can you, given the things that Danny mentioned, loss in earning and how that compounds in other things. People may not be incentivized to take these extensions. So is there any consideration of changing the expectations for now? Whether that's the COVID statement that Danny mentioned or other things. So anyone can jump in on that.
I'll jump into, the first thing, I'd be really careful to ever talk about changing criteria or thresholds or standards. You do not want to be talking about that as something you're advocating. The long-term impact of that framing, I think, is really problematic for junior faculty. And I don't think it's necessary. When I think about COVID statements and I think about what we're doing, I think about what the real professional impact is and try and educate on what that means on throughput, on availability for travel, as I think Fiona talked about. There's a lot of things to contextualize what's going on, and I think that's useful, but phrasing things in terms of changing thresholds or standards, I think is not productive for institutions or for individuals. I do think contextualizing the impact of COVID on the professional side is something really important to do. How has this affected your ability to do your work? How have you been able to pivot and change, and how have you not been able to pivot and change in doing this? That's a good conversation to have. And I could say some more, but I'll listen to my colleagues too.
So I was going to jump in and push back. So I'm going to push back on this idea of now is not the time to change standards, because if not now, then when? So I'm a member of the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, and they released a statement about what senior diversity officers should be doing on their campuses related to COVID. And part of it had to do with tenure and promotion. But I just want to take us a step out bigger and look at what this crisis is, how this crisis looks different across different populations on your campuses. And that also, at least for me, at a small liberal arts college, what's staring us down is the demographic cliff. So the fact that student demographics are going to shift, and by 2026, we're going to be looking at a very different higher ed. So in my thinking, COVID has basically sped up the inevitable. That our model in higher education, the way we're teaching, the way that we're adapting with technology, the way that we're recruiting students, that we were on the precipice for having to reinvent ourselves, and COVID just pushed us there faster. Additionally, COVID is not the only pandemic that we are dealing with right now. We are still in the throes of systemic racism, at least within the US context, which has to be part of this conversation as well. So we have this kind of perfect storm of situations occurring. And if we kick the can on standards down the road any further, we're just going to be into a bigger mess. So now is the time for institutions to start looking at their tenure and promotion standards, to start talking about equity in terms of the inclusion of qualitative and quantitative student evaluations, to start talking about the invisible labor of BIPOC faculty and other, historically marginalized and underrepresented folks, in the extra burden that they are taking on to just support students in this moment. That now is the time for, and I'm talking to tenured faculty out there, because our CDOs and provosts can't do this alone. Most of our institutions work on shared governance. Now is the time for faculty that are full and associate to push on their tenure and promotion committees to say, we make the change now to make this better for the folks that are coming through the pipe, because this isn't going to be over in 5 years or 10. The lasting implications financially for COVID for small institutions are going to be far reaching. We talk about scholarship and productivity, the amount of funds that are going to be available to produce in the way we've been used to people producing, that is going to disappear. So we really, as higher education, need to realign, because this isn't going to get any better. And I'll stop.
I think to cover, it's not changing standards we should have been doing and must keep doing. Framing it as lowering standards is what we need to avoid doing, because we can't conflate those two things, and we need to make the changes, and should have been making the changes to change how we look at it and not frame that as somehow reducing standards, because it's not.
I just want to pipe in and say I completely agree, and making that very clear, because sometimes when we say change standards, the initial reaction is to lower the standards because labs have stopped and we can't travel, we have to stop gathering data. So the instinct is to think, oh, they must be talking about lowering standards. And that is extremely dangerous, completely agree. Who wants to be the assistant professor that got the COVID tenure, right? And slipped in, COVID year. You don't want to be that person. So rather than lowering standards, exactly what Chris, I won't repeat what, Danny and Kristen, you just said, but this is a great opportunity for us to start thinking about counting and recognizing and rewarding activities that we haven't been able to do that, because we have this sacred box of what we can talk about for tenure and promotion, research, teaching, and service. And we can't really talk about all this other important things, invisible labor that our faculty engage in that makes the place run. But now we have the opportunity. We're saying, tell us about COVID, tell us about things you do to support students, tell us about all the things that you're doing to help students, faculty, and staff who need help at this time. So now we are starting, we really are asking for this information, and what an opportunity for all of us to continue recognizing this work. So broadening the standards now to include the things that we value, but never figured out how to measure. It's like we have a great opportunity here to do this right. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is so interesting. Yeah, absolutely agreeing. Yeah, I think the key is to broadening, our criteria and also the scope, like what Fiona said. And actually, I'm curious, Danny, you mentioned about COVID statement. So what do you mean? Is it related to what you just said? Yeah, can you tell us more?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern that we have, or that we're talking about, is making sure, and this is to all you all the audience out there, being really clear about the impact at the professional level, like the extra, as Fiona was saying, the extra help you're doing with students. Again, all this should have happened anyway, but this is a time to put it in. Extra help for students, specific impact on the methods or the topics of your research. Is it trial, is it lab-based? Putting all those, and I think is really good, and having that is valuable and should always be valuable in terms of what we're doing. I think the issue is, or the question is, when some people talk about COVID statements, they talk about the disparate impact on different populations with caretaking, for example, or with the impact of COVID and the other pandemic that Kristen talked about, the social justice racial pandemic that is there. I think, again, just pragmatically, I think you need to look at your context to decide how much of that to talk about. And this is not what should be talked about, but I'm trying to give pragmatic advice about the impact of you sharing that. There was a nice session on unintended consequences of diversity initiatives earlier today. And part of the evidence is when these things are raised, it can have a backlash impact on the person raising them or benefiting from some of these programs and in the whole environment. So I think you need to be careful individually and in thinking about what your institution does to find out what the unintended consequence is of that. And as Fiona mentioned earlier, sort of, do you want to be the COVID exception? Do you want to be sort of the X exception to that, which has long-term consequences for you and others thinking through that? So I think COVID statements are going to be very valuable in terms of the professional impact and broadening, as Yi said, about sort of the impact. And Kristen noted the different ways of thinking about quality. Really good. I worry about some of the specific ones that may be identity-based or caretaking-based, though real, there could be an unintended consequence of the institution or of you doing this. So I just want to be pragmatic about that and thinking about COVID statements, and does an institution do that and the impact long-term in that. So that's part of what I was talking about.
And I'm thinking absolutely, Danny, right on. I think this is why it's so important that we're looking at policies and procedures and not just what people are saying. I think it's important that any applicant tell their authentic story in their tenure and promotion dossier, or, I mean, I'll even open this to, you're seeking a tenure track position. Like, these are the values, the things that the institution needs to know about you. These are the ways, by talking through these situations, that you show growth and adaptability. Like, these are all important to your tenure portfolio. But it's also important that while we're, encouraging candidates to walk this fine line of disclosing, that we're training department chairs, search committees, everyone on the faculty, FRCs as we call it here, everyone on the tenure and promotion committee, the board, the president, everyone that is in that chain of decision making, that they are informed about the impact of COVID and all of these other things on all of our faculty, in particular our BIPOC faculty and our marginalized, historically marginalized faculty, that has to be baked in, because we don't want, Danny, as Danny is talking about and as Fiona shared, this backlash. Like, no one should be ashamed of how strongly they dealt with adversity. Those are the things that we should be championing in. And if we have to hide our stories, then, I mean, this is the way I've told people. If you have to hide your story at an institution, then maybe that's not the institution for you. You have to sit back and think, if this place can't value who I am and what I bring to the table under the worst conditions, then maybe this isn't where I need to be. Tenure isn't like a one-way street. This is a marriage. This is a courtship between you as a candidate and the institution. You have agency, you have power. You don't have to just accept what is given to you. In that, if you're in a situation and you do the gut check and it feels like this institution isn't, and I know I'm straying from COVID, but this is important. If that institution does not align with who you are authentically as a scholar and an educator, then maybe that is not the place you want to be with for your life. And that's what tenure is. I'm not saying you have to be there for life, but that's what that means. It's a marriage. And that 6 years is a courtship. And you're courting the college and the college is courting you. And if at the end of that relationship, you're not ready to step in, then don't step in. There are other places that will be happy to bring you into the fold. And I'll stop there again.
Thank you so much for all of those responses. I think a common thread in the questions was about feeling a lack of power as non-tenured faculty. And so I'm curious, if you are in an institution that maybe isn't thinking about COVID statements or isn't thinking about this more holistic approach and considering these other factors, how would you recommend people advocate for themselves?
I'll start with saying, I think the first thing is to talk with peers in your chair. I mean, I'll always start with your chair and the local context. Departments differ. Find out what your chair knows about what the possibilities are and what the resources are. Faculty Senate can also be a location to begin to get a group on where it's not you individually, but it's the faculty as a whole that makes a difference. Of course, if you're unionized, that can make a difference too in terms of the resources available to you. But I start with the chair, and affinity groups are also a good place to begin to get sort of some group action and conversation about that. So that's in terms of some of the locations of power and influence and questioning and group support for that. I think a way to frame it is always, here's what I need to do what you hired me to do, right? Here's what I need to do the type of job that I'm here to teach and do research or do service or whatever your particular job description is. The institution has a stake in you succeeding, and that framing is a very useful framing for that. and very effective, you know, I think, in terms of getting those types of resources, and frame it as a person on the ground doing the work of the institution. Here's what I can tell you is important for those of us doing the work of the institution. That's another really compelling way of moving forward, where your interests are aligned in ways that those with access to resources can see. So that's an initial take.
I would just add that you should always remember too that, like, you might think that your chairs know what you're going through and that would know that you don't have this and would provide this. And let me tell you, they don't know. I mean, you know, they could be in your department, they could be in your subfield. They don't know, you know, your everyday, what you need for your research, for your teaching. And they don't know even how to deal with tenure and promotion in an equitable way because they don't know the details. And a way for, you know, we all need to sort of come together to think about how can we evaluate tenure and promotion in an equitable way here on out for the next 5 to 10 years. And the way to do it is for you to speak up and let people know what you're dealing with, what you need, where the gaps are. So, I mean, you just have to advocate for yourself. That's the only way, and your situation is unique and nobody can intuit the support you need. So, you know, I know we're all independent and we don't need to ask for help. You know, get over it. You know, talk to your mentors, talk to your department chairs, tell them don't mince words. And, you know, we're all worried about looking weak, right? You know, I know we're in the same profession, but you know, that's the only way our institution and higher ed can survive, is to know how this impacts the core mission. And so if you don't speak out, then we can't move on.
So I had I said 2 additional thoughts. So if you feel intimidated by talking to people within your department, so I know as a junior faculty member, it can be intimidating to talk to your department chair about your needs. Practice with someone external. This is where you pull in your external, either peers or mentor, and say, can I run this language by you? What does it sound like? Can I use you as the sounding board before I go and talk to this individual? And then the second point I was going to make, and this is to put a lot of burden on faculty, but from the administrative standpoint, because I serve as senior leadership, looking at the financials of many, many institutions in the state of higher education, this is the point where faculty have to push back collectively and explain the importance of tenure. Because from a financial standpoint, and this is not to say your institutions are going under, but from a financial standpoint, the impact of COVID is going to cause very different decisions in budgets from the top down. And if faculty aren't unified in showing folks the importance of tenure and promotion, then I hate to say it, you will be outsourced. There are people right now, and it's not as if this is brand new. This is a conversation that's been going on in higher ed about the future of tenure and promotion, and if institutions are going to do this, because it is a huge financial investment from the institution. The cost of your salary, compensation, et cetera, versus bringing in a part-time faculty member to do that. Hey, the cost benefit analysis for an institution, if you get the right part-time person, looks pretty darn good not to tenure people. So this might be a time in higher ed for us to collectively lean in to the importance of tenure and promotion to this profession, because I've seen what it looks like in the horizon, and I guarantee you that higher ed is not going to look the same.
Yeah, so I agree with, you know, all of you. And also I think it's very important to speak up. Yeah, junior faculty members, I think, you know, you know what you really need. And also each person might have a different circumstances, different difficulties that they are facing. So I agree that might be the, a good, absolutely, you need to talk to your chairperson in your department. And also, I think in some universities, they have mentor programs. For example, in my university, we have mentor programs. So talking to mentors is also a very, useful way to go. And I think, if you look at it from another perspective, chairperson or people in administration, actually they are learning too. So this is an unprecedented, time. Yeah, they might not necessarily have thought through all angles. So by talking to them, actually you're educating them and helping them to figure out the best procedures to move ahead. So I think, yeah, again, it's a two-way street. You have your own needs. You want to voice, you want to communicate that, but also from the administrative point of view, they also want to know what you're thinking about, and they want to know your needs as well, your difficulties as well. So I think absolutely, communication is important, especially in this context.
Thank you. On that question of kind of advocating for yourself and communication, someone submitted a question that was, how do you reconcile doing what is ethically right, for example, social distancing, staying home, as a junior faculty member, when your university administration mandates behavior, for example, mandatory face-to-face teaching, encouraging faculty to spend more time on campus? That we know is not supported by medical or public health? How do we reconcile the moral imperative and our positions of relative power to speak out and protest such abuses of power with the recognition that we may be jeopardizing our own tenure and promotion by doing so?
So my take on this goes back to something that I said earlier about the fit of an institution and your values. If your life isn't important enough for you to lean in on, regardless of tenure and promotion, then what else? There's no way to slice and dice it. Like, you are the advocate of your one life in this lifetime and your one body that you have in this lifetime on this planet. And if you are being put in a position where you feel like your health and safety are at risk and you're unable to push back, it might be time to rethink if this is the institution I want to work for. Are their values going to be aligned with me? Because if this is the stake that they're taking on this particular issue, I guarantee you there is another issue down the road that is going to put you in the same ethical dilemma. And I don't have an answer to how you negotiate that. My answer is you advocate for yourself, listen to your gut, and then make moves where you need to make moves.
Well, when I read that question, I was just appalled. And whoever wrote this, I'm so sorry. And it is wrong, absolutely wrong, for your institution to require you to do something that is clearly unsafe and endangers you and the students and everyone in your community. So anyway, I read it, I'm appalled, and I'm, that this even happens in our profession. And I just have to say, it happened in Michigan too. When this first came up, we sort of, our graduate students, our TAs, they were unsatisfied with the university's policies around, safety and teaching, et cetera. And they're unionized and they went on strike. I mean, so it speaks to your point, Kristen. I mean, we have a community there that, were uncomfortable with whatever that was in place. And I mean, granted, it was all very new. People were working out, I think you were saying, we're all learning and we're making all kinds of mistakes as we're learning how to deal with it. But the graduate students came together and went on strike. And so that's one way of, it's a radical way of having to voice your opinions. And it's sad that it has to come to that. And it's sad to have to come to, like, you have to reevaluate where you want to be in that institution or not. But I mean, in a way, that's where it boils down to. I mean, and this is how critical the issue is. And yes, I just want to say I feel sorry. I'm so sorry that this is even happening. I'm upset to read about it. So,
just to add maybe some pragmatics around that, issues of if you can't go to your chair, HR is another place to go, and HR offices are meant to provide support and should be able to provide support for various types of circumstances. And again, if you're not unionized, I think, and most aren't. By the way, I was unionized as a Michigan TA, and it was a powerful time. Haven't seen that since. Also, faculty senate again can be another way. It kind of depends on where are the sources of faculty voice or collective voice in your institution, and HR then becomes another place from an individual and maybe more private standpoint, because some of these issues are personal, private issues that change levels of vulnerability or issue, and some of the HR processes can be effective ways of negotiating those when it's not as public what it is that you want to be talking about.
To just piggyback on that, you may, from an HR standpoint, want to look into the ADA accommodation process for your institution. So that is the process that Allegheny has been using to approve remote work. So if reasons why one might feel unsafe, they have a medical condition or a risk factor that the CDC has said could put you at higher risk for death or serious illness or complications from COVID-19 disease, take that ADA paperwork to your physician, get it signed, give it to HR, take your stance. Because if you do that and your college is accommodating of the ADA process, if they don't yield, then legally you have recourse. So I would look, if you don't want to go the public faculty senate route, I would look heavily into the HR processes because they will protect your job.
I also want to say that in that question, the person also wrote about how they have more power than the students, even though they feel powerless in that situation as a faculty member, that they also feel some responsibility for the students who are also there in the same situation. And what do they do as someone who, can help the students in that situation? How do you do that? And I thought that was just, a wonderful sentiment, that for that faculty member in that situation to be thinking about the students as well. And I think a lot of times we feel that we're pretty powerless, in a situation like that. But actually in the classroom, we do have power, and even if the university is forcing you to be on campus and teaching in person, there are still things that you can do in the classroom to make it safe. And, people teach different things and it may or may not be possible, but you can send some of your students out to collect data. Other people are doing sort of community observations or other types of activities. So you only have a small number of students in the classroom every time. It's a way to work around the rules while you're still on campus, but there are things that you can do to keep your students safe. So again, it will work for some classes, but not for all. But I think it's also good to remember that, yes, in the classroom, you do have power, you do have some power and control, and there are things that you can do to make the classroom more safe, if you have no choice and the students have no choice but to be there, there might be still things that you can do. So.
I was going to say I agree. And I mean, here's the other thing. Your institution may not have a hybrid teaching situation set up, but you could have your own if necessary, where you created your own rotation of physically distanced courses, where you had your own, types of guidelines about who wears who physically distanced in the course, who is wearing face coverings in the course. Like, that's your classroom, and you have the prerogative to set the guidelines and standards. Just like you wouldn't let someone come in and be disruptive with loud music, you could make the same argument that you coming into this space without a face covering is disruptive. It's disruptive because it's endangering everyone's life. So until you do that, you do not come into this class. And if you don't want to wear one, then you can attend remotely. Like, that's on you. But what I was gonna also add, oh no, it went away. The other thing went away. It might come back. It might not. We'll see.
Thank you all. With the less than 10 minutes that we have, I want to open up the floor to attendees. Are there any questions among the attendees? You can either use the raise hand, or you can just turn on your camera and unmute yourself.
I remembered. This is the important thing that I remembered. So just like they tell you on a flight, you put on your oxygen mask before you put on the mask for other people. So as an instructor, because I heard some like concern, guilt, whatever about the students in this situation, if you aren't okay as an educator and you aren't at your best, then your students aren't going to learn from you. So ultimately, I know you're concerned about the students, but you put on your face mask, you put on your oxygen mask first, and then you worry about what you can do to support the students. So I just wanted to put that in there too.
I think the raise hand function is actually not showing up, but.
Did you have a question, Alexandria?
Yeah, I just threw it in the chat, but maybe I can just read it out loud. Basically, I was saying, is there any place in academia for like the tortoise versus the hare? So the pandemic has brought to light divisions between academics' resources in terms of time, mental and physical health, et cetera. If we love our research and we think that research is our calling, what advice would you give for those who just don't have the same baseline to be intensely productive?
Yeah, I guess part of it is related to what Kristen said, I think, earlier, which is really good. And how is it that we think of quality versus quantity? I think conversations about the type of impact, again, in the session just prior to this one about, I'm forgetting the name, it's about changes in the discipline and how we look at what type of research is valued. I think making arguments for that, and that is coming from newer, younger, more diverse faculty. I mean, what a surprise, diversity is improving the field, right? This is continue doing that. What is valued? Is it community impact work? Is it public scholarship? I think this is where the context, again, that Kristen's been talking about, is context matters in terms of what's possible, but advocating for that, and universities seeing the value of that in terms of the demographic cliff, in terms of what students are interested in. Again, interests are aligning for kind of high productivity, don't engage students to engage in the community and students. That's changing now. And there's an alignment of interest for like the slow professor, the slow food, the slow research movement, I think is real and positive, and the tide is going that way. But your individual context is going to matter about how open that is. But start the conversation. There may be more folks thinking about that, about how to change standards, not decrease, but change standards, so that we have relevant, applied, and quality scholarship that's engaged going on.
I also think that this is where organizations like SPSP come into play when it comes to publications and our process for reviewing publications, what we see as acceptable and legitimate. So, maybe that five study paper from before that used to be the creme de la creme, maybe we need to step back from that and in shorter studies with fewer participants. And I know that gets all the way back into our replication crisis of about 5 to 7 years ago, but maybe we need to bounce back in the other direction in terms of publications. I mean, if we want to, again, be more accessible to the general public, then we need to write differently anyway. So maybe this is the point, as you know, a professional org, that we start thinking about what we value, what we publish, how we write. Maybe there needs to be a new journal that is all just white papers or one pagers or policy briefs or whatever, that speaks to where we are needed in society right now. And I could go on a whole other tirade about where social psychology is needed in society right now and the way we need to be writing to affect change. But this is also the time where we, as members of SPSP, can lean on our leadership and say to the editors, we're in a cray time, folks. And the way publishing used to look is just not going to be the same. Can we adapt? And that won't happen overnight, but maybe a year from now at SPSP, we're having a different conversation about what publications are acceptable, the number of studies, the types of standards, what we are valuing as an org, because we can also change the academy and tenure and promotion standards by changing the way that we value research, service, teaching as well. I mean, it's not like we're, as a professional org, in a silo. The rest of the academy is feeding off of us. The standards of what we say are high impact studies. We're producing that, and then we're replicating it over in tenure and promotion. So, I mean, this is another place where we can change this.
So actually, one observation is that I think in the past years, there are a lot of special issues on COVID-19. So all aspects, you know, and I saw a lot of submission. I'm editor-in-chief in one of journals as well. So actually we have unprecedented number of submissions that's related to COVID-19, and that's understandable, and that would be very, you know, important to know all aspects. So I think, you know, part of it, what I observed from there is that many people are very adaptive and malleable in the sense that they can use, you know, different ways to collect data. And many of them use online platforms like MTurk, Carl Research, or in mainland China, now we have KDNet, Research Poll, all types of things that you can collect data, you know, still during this time. And sometimes, you know, might be because of the situation, it make people more adaptive and more creative in using whatever methods or whatever resources available, yeah, for them to do research. So I think, you know, that might be the one of the like silver linings, you know. I see a more varieties and types of research, and also within the same, you know, individuals as well. For example, I observed some researchers who didn't really use a lot of online research previously, but because of the circumstances, they pick this up, you know, learn these new skills. So I think that, yeah, is interesting to observe.
Thank you. Well, Jennifer, I saw that you raised your hand, but I'm also looking at the clock, and I'm afraid we're going to get cut off right at 1:30. Or 3:30 your time if you're on the East Coast. And the Whova app, I think, will still be open. I think that Q&A will stay there. I'm hoping some of our panelists might be willing to address some of those questions that weren't already addressed. But if not, I really appreciate your time. I know we all do. This was incredibly informative. And we just thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Sarah and Frankie. This was really nice.
Yes,
thank you to the attendees.
Great conversation.
Yes,
Questions, important questions.
Mm-hmm.